This week, we will go to Module 2. Module 2 will cover Chapter 5 from the textbook. From the textbook, you can see in Chapter 5, we will cover loops. We will talk about different kinds of loops. Before we start the lecture, I just want to cover a couple questions you have in your quiz 1. So one question is, which below is not a possible value for x from the statement below? We quickly covered math.random in the previous chapter. So then we told you math.random actually is the return type is double. And the math.random value is greater and equal to 0, but not including 1. So we need to be careful whenever you want to create a random integer number. Okay, so we need to make sure after you get the result, you need to do the casting. So this casting is the same as C++ and Java. You can just have a parenthesis. They will make later the value casting to the int. But one thing, in order to get a random number between 0 to 50, so we need to enlarge math.random, so we times 50. So you can see here, 50 times 1 is 50, but not included. So that's why after you cast the whole value, the whole thing actually double times integer still double. So then after you cast to the int, so the only answer is not possible value is 50. So that's one question you guys may have question about. And right, this week we will use the math.random even more. So the second question, I want to remind you about the printf. So when we use the printf, here they say this question is a compiling error for the following code block. So actually it's no error. Okay, so we see this one. This one you have x in integer, string s, you have string, then you have double value. So you need to always be careful when you use the printf. You have one string argument first. Then depends on here, you have how many variables, the number you need to match. So you can see here we have one integer, one string, one integer, one floating number. So 1, 2, 3, 4. You need to have 4 values follow with the string, separate with the comma. Okay, so this one is integer, so x is fine. This one is string, so s variable is fine. So here is integer, so you can give them constant integer, that's fine. So then the floating number, here you give them the d is double value. So that's why here is correct format. So be careful about whenever you use a printf. The most important thing is in the first string you passing by, how many value you want them to plug in. You need to have the same number afterward. Otherwise, you will have a compiling error. Okay, so that's the 2 questions I want to cover from your quiz 1 if you have question. So that's really move forward to our lecture 2. So like we say, the first thing we will talk about different loops. So then we will talk about math.random to generate random number. So we will give you the example in GUI and the console. Then you will do your lab exercise 2. So then I will talk about more example about nested loop and the break and the continue. Then how to convert string and number. So you will work on your assignment 2. So the first thing, what kind of loop we cover? The first thing, what is loop? So loops are construct that control repeated execution of a block of statement. So that's why sometimes you want to repeatedly to do some calculation for a specific time, then we write a loop for that. The concept of a loop is a fundamental to programming. So on the other hand, as we say, this class is not intro class. We kind of want you guys already know at least one programming language. So that means you already learned loop before. So we just quickly do some review. So in this lecture, and also one thing is in Java, did provide 3 different kind of loop, the same as C++. We have while loop, we have do while loop, we have the for loop. And luckily, these 3 kind of loop, for many different programming language, they all provide those kind of loop. And also Java and C++, they have the same syntax. So the first thing we see, the while loop. So the while loop, actually you have the while keyword, then followed by a condition. So if this condition is true, I get into the block after the while loop. On the other hand, if this condition is false, so then I skip this statement and go to the next line after the statement. So the while loop executes statement repeatedly while the condition is true. So they finish when the condition is false. Then we can see a while loop example for here. For example, we want to print welcome to Java 100 times. So then you see after your while loop, you have a condition. If this condition is true, I get in. So usually we need a counter variable defined before the while loop. So we give them the initial value. So when the count equal to 0, we start. So while the count less than 100, we get into the block. So we print one line, welcome to Java. But before we leave the loop, don't forget you need to increment or decrement your counter. So that's why we know how many times we can do. So then you see here until we do 100 times, then we finish. So one thing we need to be careful is while loop condition, usually inside the code block, we have the condition or counter change the value. So that's why we can have a guard while loop condition here to make sure do I need to get in or not. So that's why here usually the counter we do define the variable outside. So then here we still can use that in the while loop. While loop, actually if we using the while loop for the specific how many times to do, a lot of time they can replace with the for loop. Because while loop actually is more widely we can use. They can have different condition. But if only specific say how many times we want to do, a lot of time we do the for loop. For the for loop, they have the for keyword. After the for keyword, you have the parentheses. In the parentheses, you have 3 statements you need to pass. That's by default and no changed. The first thing, initial statement. The second one, increment or decrement. Then, the second one, condition. Then the third one, increment or decrement. So that's why you can see the initial condition is you give them the initial value. Sometimes you can just the same thing at the same time define the variable you want. So for example, I want to do the same thing like the while loop here. I want to display 100 times welcome to Java. I have I equal to 0. Then condition I less than 100. So I increment. So when I start I equal to 0, I print because they are less than 100. So I print. But after I finish, see I increment I. Then we check the condition second time. So then we continue. So they have very similar concept. So whenever you want to do specific times to repeat specific time, you know the number of time. We either do for loop or while loop. They are exchangeable. But while loop, sometimes they are more flexible can do. So for example, we see the guessing number example. This problem we then generate a number from computer. So then we prompt to the user to guess what this number is. So you will have the output like this. Okay. So the first thing before that, computer already generate a number between 0 to 100. We don't know that what number it is. So we ask the user to enter their guess. So if user enter the value is too high, we say it's too high. So that's why user can continue to adjust their input. If too low, we say too low. So then they can adjust their input until user match the number. Then we finish. So this one actually is very useful while loop example we can use. As long as the user guess is not equal to the magic number we have in computer, we continue to ask user to enter their guess. So then we give them the hint. So so you see here. So that's the requirement. You will write a program randomly generate an integer between 0 to 100 inclusively. So be careful. Inclusively, that means you need to including 100. So then in the while loop, we check the user input. So here you will see that's the breakdown how we will implement that. So the first thing, you need to generate a random number. You need to prompt to user for the input. So we save the user input. So we compare the random number while the user input in a while loop. If they are the same, we break the while loop. Otherwise, we need to check. If the guessing number greater than the number, we just say, oh, that's too high. So ask user to do again. Otherwise, we do the less than. So we tell them to make that a little bigger number so you can guess the number. So of course, I will give you the sample demo file. But what I want you to do actually is pause the video now. Can you try to write a flow chart how you will do that? Or have your pseudocode ready before you see the demo file? So before you see the demo file, how we will random generate a number between 0 to 100 inclusively? Math.random, right? So math.random, like earlier we said, they are between 0, including 0, now 1. So I want to get the number between 0 to 100. So that's why I need to multiply by what? Because you are not including 1, so I need to do one more. I need to multiply 101. So that's I can make this number between 0 to 100. But don't forget, they are double value. I need to cast to the integer. So this number is our guessing number. So then so then here you will see the sample code. On the sample code, that's from the file you should download. And also I have the link underneath. You can download the file from the demo file. So everything like we say, when you have your Java programming, every Java file is a class. So we call that guess number file, guess number class. So I have a main function. So I generate a random number between 0 to 100. So then since I want to get a user input, we need to create a scanner. So we just ask the user to guess a number between 0 to 100. Then we get the user input, right? So then like earlier we said we have the while loop. So the while loop is if the guess not equal to number, I need to continue. So on the other hand, when beginning, I don't have the user guess yet. So I need to force to get into my while loop. So that's why we make the guess is equal to -1. That's out of 0 to 100. So then we can use ask user to enter their guess. So I put the guess into the from the scanner get next int. So then I've put in the guess. So you see for different conditions, if they equal, wonderful, we just say you got that correct, okay? Or if too high, I display too high. Too low, I display too low. So you see after they finish, if they are equal, then the while loop will become false. So we leave the while loop. Otherwise, they will continue have the result. Okay, so make sure you download this file. And also, I want you to think, you try this example, you run that, right? So actually, we have one more while loop we didn't talk about. We have the do while loop. So can I change this one become the do while loop or not? I will talk about in next video.